Hey guys, tonight we arrived somewhere you probably wouldn't choose for a weekend getaway unless you truly hated convenience. You're standing on uneven stone, the kind that never fully dries, no matter how politely the sun asks. The sea is everywhere below you, around you, inside your ears, breathing in and out like an enormous, slightly judgmental animal. Ahead of you Risa's the lighthouse, talon pale, its lantern already glowing faintly, even though the sky hasn't fully committed to night yet. You've come to the 19th century, and not the fancy part with ballrooms and dramatic coats. This is the practical 19th century. The damp one, the kind that smells faintly of salt, oil, and boiled coffee. A place where time moves slowly, not because anyone wants it to, but because it has no reason to hurry. As you step closer, the lighthouse hums not loudly, not proudly, just enough to remind you it's alive. The wind tugs at your coat like an impatient child, and you realize immediately that you are underdressed, underprepared, and wildly overconfident. You probably wouldn't survive this. That's not an insult. It's just a quiet observation, like noticing you brought sandals to a snowstorm. Before anything else happens, before you climb stairs, before you meet the keeper, before you learn why snacks matter more than dignity out here, there's something modern that needs to happen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're still awake enough to type, go ahead and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Somewhere, a lighthouse keeper would find that deeply fascinating. Mostly because they never know what time it is anymore. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the heavy door, and it responds with a long, tired creak, as if it's been opening for decades, and would like some recognition for that. Inside, the air changes. It's warmer, but only technically. The warmth comes from effort, not generosity. Oil lamps flicker along the walls, casting slow shadows that stretch and shrink like they're breathing. Everything smells faintly of metal, soot, and something edible that's been reheated one too many times. This is where a lighthouse keeper lives, not visits. Lives. Historically speaking, lighthouse keepers in the 19th century often spent weeks or even months isolated, especially on remote rocks or small islands. Their primary duty was simple in theory and relentless in practice. Keep the light burning, no matter what. Ships depended on it. Lives depended on it. And unfortunately for you, that meant routines, repetition, and snacks, chosen less for joy and more for survival. You take off your coat and immediately regret it. The cold doesn't attack it, settled. It finds your bones and politely moves in. Somewhere deeper inside the lighthouse, you hear footsteps, slow, familiar. The footsteps of someone who has walked these floors so many times they could do it asleep. And, statistically speaking, sometimes they did. The keeper greets you with a nod. No handshake. Hands are busy out here. They're always oily, salty, or holding something important. He looks calm in the way people do when chaos has stopped impressing them. His clothes are thick, practical, and permanently damp at the edges. You notice crumbs on the table behind him. This will matter later. You follow him further inside, and your ears slowly adjust. The wind becomes background noise. The sea turns into a low, constant seek. The lighthouse itself clicks and ticks, metal expanding and contracting, like a giant mechanical clock that forgot to keep time but remembered to make noise. This is your new world now. A world built around waiting. One widely accepted fact is that lighthouse keepers worked long, monotonous shifts, often alone or with just one assistant, maintaining lenses, cleaning soot-winding mechanisms, and watching the horizon for hours at a time. What people talk about less is how hungry that kind of waiting makes you. Not dramatic hunger, not starvation. Who's to steady gnawing awareness that food is comfort, routine, and something to look forward to when the sea refuses to do anything interesting. The keeper gestures toward a small table near the wall. On it, a tin, a mug, and something wrapped in cloth. You don't open it yet. There's a rhythm to this place, and you're already slightly out of sync. As you stand there, you realize how quiet this kind of life is. Not silent never. Silent but quiet in the sense that nothing is competing for your attention. No conversations drifting in from other rooms. No distant traffic, just wind, waves, and the soft promise of a light that must never go out. Historians still wonder how different keepers handled the psychological strain of isolation. Some wrote journals, some talked to lamps, some developed very strong opinions about food. Snacks, especially, became emotional anchors, small pleasures measured out carefully, because once you ran out, there was no corner shop, no friendly neighbor, no delivery rider heroically battling the weather. You glance again at the table. The tin catches the lamplight. It doesn't look impressive. That's the point. Out here, modest things carry weight. A biscuit isn't just a biscuit. It's a marker of time. A reason to pause. A small reward for not letting the light fail. The keeper finally sits, motions for you to do the same, and pours something dark into a mug. The smell is bitter and familiar. Coffee, probably boiled too long and loved anyway. He takes a sip and exhales slowly, like someone who has nowhere else to be and no reason to rush. You feel your breathing begin to match the space. Slower, deeper. The lighthouse doesn't demand excitement. It asks for attention, patience, and the occasional bite of something dry and reassuring. Outside, the sky darkens fully now. The lantern brightens in response, doing what it has always done. You're here at the beginning of the night, at the beginning of the routine, at the beginning of understanding why snacks quiet, sturdy, unremarkable snacks matter so much when the world narrows down to a single beam of light, and without realizing it, you're ready to stay. You don't notice the routine at first. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in quietly, like day damp, until suddenly you realize everything here happens in a certain order, at a certain pace, and deviating from it feels almost rude. The keeper moves through the space with practiced economy. He doesn't rush, but he also doesn't linger. Every action has been smoothed down over years of repetition. Like sea glass, you follow him as he checks lamps, wipes a thin layer of salt from a window that faces the sea, and adjusts a wick by a fraction so small it feels symbolic. This is how the day and night unfolds here. Small motions, constant long stretches of waiting punctuated by tiny, necessary tasks. You begin to understand that this routine isn't just about keeping the light burning. It's about keeping the keeper intact. In the 19th century, lighthouse work demanded relentless consistency. The lens had to be cleaned daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Oil reservoirs needed refilling. Mechanisms had to be wound, often every few hours, including through the night. Ships didn't care if you were tired. Between these tasks, there are pauses, not breaks. Exactly. More like moments where nothing urgent is happening, and you are trusted not to invent problems. These are the moments when the keeper eats. He gestures to a shelf, and you see it clearly now. Neatly arranged tins, wrapped parcels, and jars. Nothing flashy, no labels designed to tempt, just containers that promise calories and familiarity. Food rest. About novelty, it's about reliability. One accepted historical fact is that lighthouse keepers were often supplied with non-perishable foods designed to last through long stretches without resupply. Things like hardtack, salted meats, dried legumes, tea, coffee, and occasionally preserved fruit. Fresh food was a rare and fragile luxury. Dependent on calm seas and punctual boats, the keeper opens a small tin and takes out something square and pale. He doesn't offer it yet. First, he sits. Sitting is important. Eaten standing up, he seems to imply without words, is how accidents happen. You sit too. The chair creaks, but holds. Everything here holds, even when it complains. The first bite is quiet. Intentionally so, chewing echoes oddly in the cylindrical space of the lighthouse, and you become aware of sound in a new way. Crunches feel dramatic. Soft foods are preferred, but not always available. This particular snack tastes like flour, salt, and resignation. It's not unpleasant, it's just committed to its purpose. You chew slowly. You have nothing else to do, and rushing would feel disrespectful. There's a comfort in knowing exactly when the next snack will come. The keeper eats at set times, not because a clock demands it, but because his body does. Hunger here doesn't sneak up on you. It arrives politely, having learned the schedule. A lesser-known detail is that some keepers deliberately ration their food into smaller, more frequent portions to create more moments of comfort throughout the day. A biscuit at mid-morning, a piece of cheese in the afternoon, something warm at night if fuel allowed. These weren't indulgences, they were morale strategies. The keeper glances at the door. Listening, the wind shifts. The waves sound closer now. As if leaning in, he stands, checks the lantern again, and then returns, apparently satisfied that nothing dramatic is about to happen. This, too, is part of the routine. Checking, trusting, checking again. You notice how the routine shapes time, without bells or crowds or sunlight bouncing off neighboring buildings. Hours blur. Meals become anchors. You remember that you've eaten because you remember where you were sitting when you did. Historians still wonder how strictly routines were enforced versus personally adapted. Some keepers followed official schedules to the minute. Others adjusted based on weather, fatigue, or personal superstition. There are records of keepers who always ate at the same time as a particular star rose, or after a specific wave pattern appeared. The keeper pours tea now. It smells faintly metallic, like the kettle has stories it refuses to tell. Tea here isn't a treat. It's a companion. Something warm to hold while staring at a horizon that rarely changes and yet demands constant attention. You take a sip and immediately understand why people complained and loved it simultaneously. It's strong, possibly oversteeped, Definitely effective. The routine continues. Clean. Check. Wait. Snack. Repeat. You begin to feel your own internal clock slow. There's no reason to rush digestion. No reason to multitask. Eating becomes a single activity again, not something done while reading, walking, or worrying. You eat, and that's enough. A light joke drifts through your mind. If mindfulness had a mascot, it would be a lighthouse keeper chewing a biscuit while glaring suspiciously at the sea. Another follows. Quickly you suspect that if someone invented snack meditation, it was probably by accident on a cold rock with limited supplies. The keeper finishes his tea and wraps the remaining food carefully. Nothing is left exposed. Moisture is the enemy. So is carelessness. Every crumb counts, not because food is scarce in an absolute sense, but because replacement is uncertain. Outside, the beam sweeps steadily across the dark water. Inside, you feel oddly full, not just from the snack, but from the structure of the place. The routine has room for you now. You're no longer a visitor. You're part of the rhythm. As the keeper rises to begin the next check, you follow, already anticipating the next pause, the next small meal, the next quiet moment when time loosens its grip. The staircase waits for you in the center of the lighthouse, curling upward like a patient thought you haven't finished yet. It's narrow, stone at first, then iron, worn smooth by decades of boots that knew exactly where to land. You hesitate only briefly before following the keeper onto the first step, and immediately understand why people here develop strong legs and stronger opinions about unnecessary movement. Climbing is not exercise in this place. It's obligation. The stairs connect everything that matters. The oil room, the sleeping quarters, the lantern itself. You go up and down them so often that your body memorizes the turns. The slight lean to the left, near the middle. The place where the step dips just enough to surprise you if you're not paying attention. As you climb, the air shifts. It grows cooler, thinner, carrying the smell of oil and metal. Each footstep echoes a slow, hollow rhythm that matches your breathing. You realize quickly that no one climbs these stairs casually. Every ascent is purposeful, and every descent is slightly hopeful that you won't need to climb again too soon. One accepted historical fact is that lighthouse keepers often climbed their towers dozens of times a day, especially before modern automation. Lenses needed cleaning, lamps needed tending, and clockwork mechanisms that rotated the great Fresnel lens had to be wound by hand. These mechanisms were heavy, and they did not care if you were tired. Halfway up, the keeper pauses, not because he's exhausted, though that would be understandable, but because this is where he always pauses. A hand rests on the railing. A breath is taken. The pause feels ceremonial, like a comma in a long sentence. You pause, too, and you notice it. The faint scent of something edible. Not strong, not obvious, just a whisper of starch and warmth. Snacks, it turns out, travel with the keeper. Pockets are practical out here, and many of them hold more than tools. There's a lesser-known detail that some keepers kept small food caches at different levels of the lighthouse. A biscuit tucked near the lantern. A bit of cheese wrapped carefully near the sleeping quarters. Not because they were lazy, but because hunger doesn't care where you are when it arrives, and climbing hungry is a special kind of misery. You continue upward. The light grows brighter as you approach the lantern room, even though the flame itself is shielded. The sound changes too. The wind is louder here, closer, as if it's trying to join you inside. At the top, the keeper tends to the lamp with practiced hands. He wipes soot from the glass chimney, adjusts the wick, checks the oil. You stand back, instinctively. This is not a place for unnecessary gestures. While he works, you feel it. The subtle appetite that climbing creates. It's not hunger exactly. It's more like your body gently reminding you that effort deserves acknowledgement. The keeper reaches into his pocket and produces something small and wrapped. He doesn't offer it immediately. First, he finishes the task. Routine before reward. When he finally hands it to you, it's a plain biscuit. Slightly cracked, softened by time and warmth. You eat it slowly, leaning against the cool metal railing, watching the light sweep across the water below. This is when snacks become philosophy. Eating up here feels different. Elevated, literally and figuratively. Each bite is measured, partly because you don't want crumbs near the mechanism, and partly because you don't want the moment to end too quickly. Historians still wonder how much autonomy keepers had in shaping their daily food rituals. Official supply lists existed, but personal habits varied widely. Some kept strict ration schedules. Others rewarded themselves after particularly brutal climbs or storms. Food became a language spoken only to oneself. You joke quietly in your head that this is the original Stairmaster diet plan. Climb endlessly, snack modestly, repeat forever. Another thought follows that. No fitness program has ever demanded quite this level of commitment to illumination. The keeper finishes his inspection and nods. It's time to go back down. Descending is easier on the lungs, but harder on the knees. You take it slowly, hands brushing the wall, steps careful. As you descend, you realize something else. Snacks here aren't just fuel. They're markers of effort, proof that you've done something necessary, earned something small. By the time you reach the lower level again, your legs are warm, your breathing steady, and your mind quieter than before. The staircase has done its work, and somewhere nearby, you suspect another snack waits, timed, not by clocks, but by the body that climbs these stairs, day after day, listening to its own quiet needs. The wind finds you again the moment you step closer to the outer door. It doesn't burst in dramatically. It slides through gaps, seeps into seams, and settles against your skin like it has a personal grievance. Outside, the waves have grown louder, more conversational, as if they've been saving stories for you specifically. You stand near a narrow window and look out. The sea is restless. Tonight not angry, just energetic. White crests appear and vanish, appearing briefly like thoughts you almost remember. The lighthouse stands firm, but you feel how exposed it really is. There's nothing between you and the weather except stone, iron, and stubbornness. This is where hunger begins to feel different. One widely accepted historical fact is that lighthouse keepers were constantly battling the elements. Cold, dampness, and those conditions dramatically increased calorie needs. Cold air burns energy. Wind drains warmth. Even standing still out here feels like work. You don't notice the hunger right away. It arrives quietly, the way fatigue does after a long walk, a soft emptiness behind the ribs. A mild longing for something solid, something dependable. The keeper notices. before you do. He always does. He closes the shutter partway, not to block the view, but to soften the draft, and moves toward the small preparation area. There's no kitchen in the modern sense, just a surface, a stove that demands patience, and shelves that creak slightly when opened. The wind rattles the structure now. Testing it, the lighthouse responds with low groans and metallic sighs, like an old ship remembering how it used to move. You realize this constant noise is part of why snacks matter. Eating gives your hands something to do that isn't gripping railings or bracing against imaginary sways. The keeper unwraps something dense and dark. It smells faintly smoky. Salted meat, perhaps, or fish dried until it forgot it was ever soft. Preservation was an art in the 19th century, especially for isolated outposts like this. Salt, smoke, and time were the tools. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers preferred cold snacks during windy conditions, not because they enjoyed them more, but because cooking during heavy winds could be unpredictable and dangerous. Flames flickered. Smoke misbehaved. A cold snack was a safe snack. You chew slowly, listening to the wind drag itself along the outer walls. The food is chewy, demanding attention. You don't mind. Chewing becomes another anchor, another way to stay present while the weather does whatever it wants. The hunger sharpens slightly, then fades. Not gone, just settled, satisfied enough to stop asking questions. You notice how the keeper eats, facing inward, away from the window. Not out of fear, out of habit. Watching the sea too closely during storms is a good way to invent worries. The light is doing its job. That's enough. There's a soft humor in how seriously snacks are treated here. Portions are modest, but intentional. You imagine someone from the mainland complaining about portion sizes and immediately being reassigned to this rock for character development. Another quiet joke crosses your mind. The sea may be vast and dramatic, but the real power struggle here is between appetite and supply. The wind rises, then falls, like a long breath. The lighthouse sways not truly, but just enough to make your inner ear suspicious. You finish the snack and wipe your hands carefully. Crumbs are dangerous, not just because of pests, but because waste feels personal out here. Historians still wonder how much weather influenced food choices beyond preservation. Some journals suggest keepers ate more frequently during storms, even if exertion didn't increase, simply because eating provided comfort and structure when the outside world felt chaotic. The keeper pours you a small cup of something warm now. Not coffee, not tea. Something simpler. Broth, maybe. Thin, salty, and deeply reassuring. Steam curls upward, briefly fogging your vision, and you welcome the heat like an old friend. You sip and feel warmth spread slowly, deliberately. This is not a drink meant to impress. It's meant to stay. Outside, the beam cuts through mist and spray, steady as ever. Inside, your body recalibrates. Wind, waves, hunger-itch, one acknowledged, addressed, and then set aside. You realize something important. Snacks here are not distractions. They are responses. The sea speaks in waves and wind. The keeper answers with light and food. As the storm noise settles into a steady background roar, you feel your own thoughts quiet. There's nothing to solve, nothing to predict. Just weather happening, hunger eased, and time moving the way it always does here, slowly, persistently, without apology. And somewhere in the lighthouse, wrapped carefully and waiting patiently, the next snack already exists, prepared for the moment the wind decides to ask again. The stove is already warm when you approach it, though warm is a generous interpretation. It radiates a determined kind of heat, the sort that insists it's doing its best under difficult circumstances. Made of iron and streaked with years of soot, it sits against the wall like a stubborn animal that refuses to be replaced because, frankly, there is nothing else. The keeper crouches and adjusts a vent with 2 fingers, listening closely. The stove responds with a soft clank and a sigh of air. This is a conversation they've been having for years. No raised voices, no surprises, just mutual tolerance. In the 19th century, most lighthouse stoves were small, fuel-efficient, and deeply unimpressive. Coal or wood had to be rationed carefully, especially in isolated stations where resupply depended entirely on weather. Heat was precious, cooking heat even more so. You hold your hands out, palms forward, and feel the uneven warmth lick at your skin. One hand warms faster than the other. You rotate them slowly, like you're turning pages in a very boring book called Hand Temperature. The keeper sets a kettle on the stove. It's dented. Of course, it is. Everything here is dented, scratched, repaired, and forgiven. The kettle does not whistle. It merely announces readiness through subtle changes in sound, which the keeper somehow understands immediately. While the water heats, he unwraps a small parcel. Cloth gives way to something pale and firm. Cheese! Not the kind you'd photograph. The kind you'd trust. Hard, aged, and faintly aromatic in a way that suggests it has seen things. A lesser-known detail is that cheese was a favored lighthouse snack, not just for its durability, but for its ability to improve morale. It offered fat, salt, and a sense of indulgence without spoiling quickly. Some keepers even recorded which cheeses aged best in damp sea air, turning necessity into quiet expertise. The keeper slices it carefully. Thin slices, respectful slices. He hands you one, and you let it warm slightly in your fingers before eating. The texture softens just enough. The flavor is strong, but not aggressive, like it's learned restraint. You chew slowly, standing near the stove, the kettle beginning to murmur. This is comfort, lighthouse style. No plush chairs, no blankets, just heat, calories, and the satisfaction of something working as intended. A light joke surfaces. If comfort food had a maritime license, this cheese would qualify. Another follows quickly. You suspect this stove has been warmed by more hopes than hands over the years. The kettle is ready. The keeper pours water over grounds or leaves. He doesn't explain, and you don't ask. The result is dark and steaming. He hands you a mug, and you cradle it carefully. The heat seeps into your fingers, then your wrists, then settles somewhere behind your sternum. You sip. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be. Historians still wonder how much individuality keepers expressed through food preparation. Official rations were standardized, but small choices: how long to heat water, how thick to slice cheese, when to allow something warm created personal rituals that anchored identity in an otherwise repetitive life. The wind hums outside. The stove hums inside. The lighthouse hums everywhere else. You feel enclosed, protected by layers of stone and habit, The keeper finishes his drink and sets the mug upside down to dry. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. You do the same, mimicking the movement without thinking. As you step back from the stove, the warmth lingers, following you like a memory. You know it won't last. That's fine. It doesn't need to. Somewhere nearby, the stairs wait. The lantern waits, and eventually hunger will return. Polite but persistent. When it does, the stove will be here again, patient and unimpressed by time. For now, you feel steady, warm enough, fed enough, ready to continue the slow, circular dance of tending light, weather, and yourself. The tin makes a sound before it opens, a dull, metallic complaint, like it would rather remain closed out of principle. The keeper ignores this and pries it open anyway, revealing the most reliable object in the lighthouse. Hardtack, it doesn't look impressive. It never has. Square, pale, and unapologetically dense. It sits there like a challenge. This is food that does not flirt. It does not crumble politely. It does not care about your teeth or your expectations. It exists to last. One widely accepted historical fact is that hardtack, also known as ship's biscuit, was a staple food for sailors and lighthouse keepers throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. Made from flour, water, and sometimes salt, it was baked multiple times to remove all moisture, allowing it to survive months or even years without spoiling. You pick one up and immediately understand why it earns such a reputation. It's heavier than it looks. Solid, reassuring. In a mildly threatening way, you tap it lightly against the table, and it responds with a sound closer to wood than bread. The keeper watches you with faint amusement. He's seen this moment before. Everyone underestimates hardtack once. You take a careful bite. Very careful. Your jaw does some calculations. Your teeth reconsider their life choices. Eventually, a corner gives way. The taste is neutral flour and salt. Nothing more, but the texture demands patience. This is not a snack you rush unless you enjoy dental consequences. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers softened hardtack intentionally, soaking it in tea, coffee, broth, or even seawater in emergencies. Some preferred it slightly softened. Others insisted it should be eaten dry, claiming it built character, jaw strength, or both. You try dipping a piece into your mug. It absorbs liquid slowly, reluctantly, like it's suspicious of change. When you bite again, it's marginally kinder. Marginally. There's something oddly meditative about eating hardtack. Each bite takes effort. Each chew requires attention. You can't mindlessly snack on it. You are fully present, whether you want to be or not. A quiet joke drifts through your mind. This is mindfulness training, disguised as food. Another Folisu suspect hardtack has outlived several empires purely out of spite. The keeper eats his without ceremony. He's made peace with it. For him, hardtack is dependable. It's there when storms delay supplies, when fresh food is a memory, when the sea decides no boats are visiting this month. You notice how he breaks it carefully, catching crumbs before they scatter. Waste is unacceptable, but so is attracting unwanted guests. Mice, in particular, have no respect for maritime solitude. Historians still wonder how much hardtack consumption varied between stations. Some records suggest keepers supplemented it heavily with cheese or preserves to make it more tolerable. Others seem to accept it as the baseline of existence, improving mood through routine rather than flavor. Outside, the wind has softened. Inside, the lighthouse settles. You finish your piece and feel that specific kind of fullness that comes from dense food. Not heavy, just anchored. Hardtack doesn't comfort you emotionally. It reassures you logically. It says, you will not starve tonight. You will have something tomorrow. Probably the day after that. 2. The keeper closes the tin with care. It'll be opened again soon enough. As you wipe your hands and take another sip of your drink, you realize this snack, more than any other, defines lighthouse life. It's not elegant. It's not kind. But it is honest. And out here, surrounded by water and wind and long stretches of nothing, honesty goes a long way. The cloth comes away slowly, folded back like it's protecting something fragile, which is amusing, because what's underneath has survived far worse than curiosity. Cheese again, but not the same cheese as before. This one is darker at the edges, firmer in the center, and wrapped with a kind of care usually reserved for letters or small secrets. The keeper lifts it with both hands, not because it's heavy, but because it deserves respect. Out here, cheese is more than food. It's potential happiness. You're invited closer. The air carries a sharper scent, now nutty, salty, slightly sweet. It's not overwhelming. It's just enough to remind you that time can improve things if left alone long enough. One widely accepted historical fact is that cheese was commonly included in lighthouse provisions due to its long shelf life and high caloric value. Hard cheeses aged well in cool environments, and the steady temperatures of stone towers often help them mature rather than spoil. The keeper slices it carefully, slower than necessary. A cool rush. He doesn't thin slices again, but slightly thicker this time, like he's feeling generous or sentimental. You take a piece and notice how different this feels from hard. It yields slightly when pressed. It invites you in. Eating it feels almost luxurious by comparison, which is saying something, given the setting. A lesser-known detail is that some lighthouse keepers intentionally age their cheese longer than recommended, preferring stronger flavors as a way to break the monotony of their diets. A few journals mention keepers arguing politely, but passionately over optimal aging times. You chew, and the flavor spreads slowly. It lingers. This is not a background snack. This is a snack that expects to be noticed. The keeper leans back against the wall, chewing thoughtfully. You both face inward, the lantern light flickering softly across iron fittings. The moment feels earned. Historians still wonder how often food became a point of emotional attachment for isolated keepers. Letters mention specific cheeses, with fondness usually reserved for people. When resupply boats arrived, cheese was often checked first, before mail. A soft joke surfaces. If companionship had a flavor, it might be this salty, aged, quietly reliable. Another follows whose suspect this cheese has listened to more storms than most sailors. You finish your slice and feel that pleasant heaviness that comes from fat and salt doing their work. The keeper wraps the remaining cheese carefully, tucking it back into its place. Not all of it is meant for tonight. Anticipation matters. Outside, the sea comes further. The lighthouse responds by sounding less tense, like it knows the worst has passed. Inside, your stomach agrees. You realize that snacks here are about balance. Hardtack for survival, cheese for morale, warm drinks for comfort. Each one answers a different need. As the keeper stands and prepares to check the lantern again, you follow, feeling steadier, more grounded. The lighthouse no longer feels like a structure you're visiting. It feels like a system you're participating in. And somewhere, wrapped in cloth and patience, the cheese waits, improving quietly, ready for the next moment when time needs a little flavor. The smell reaches you before the food does. Salty, faintly briny, with an edge of smoke that suggests patience rather than heat. The keeper opens a small wooden box, its lid worn smooth by years of careful lifting. And inside lies fish foam, pale and preserved with the kind of seriousness usually reserved for documents. Salted fish doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't sizzle or steam. It simply exists, waiting to be acknowledged. You're offered a piece, and you accept, already adjusting your expectations. This is not indulgence. This is agreement between hunger and circumstance. One widely accepted historical fact is that salted fish was a cornerstone of coastal diets in the 19th century, especially for maritime workers like lighthouse keepers. Cod, herring, or similar fish were heavily salted and dried to ensure they lasted through long periods without refrigeration. You take a bite. It's dense, chewy, and unapologetically salty. Your mouth reacts instantly, urging you to drink something. The keeper, anticipating this, slides a mug toward you. Water this time. Plain. Necessary. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers preferred eating salted fish in very small portions, stretching it across days or weeks. Too much at once was unpleasant, but a little at a time felt grounding, especially during long watches when time blurred and appetite wandered. You chew slowly, listening to the lighthouse settle around you. The sound of the sea filters through the walls, muted now, like it's grown tired of talking. Each chew takes time. That's the point. Salted fish does not reward impatience. A quiet joke floats through your thoughts. This snack is less treat and more commitment. Another fallacy suspect this fish has traveled more than you ever will, and yet ended up here, quietly doing its job. The keeper eats with the same measured pace. No conversation. None needed. Eaten here is a shared silence, a small ritual performed side by side. Historians still wonder how taste preferences evolved in isolated stations. Did keepers grow to enjoy foods like salted fish, or did enjoyment become irrelevant? Journals suggest a mix. Some developed genuine fondness. Others simply stopped expecting pleasure. You finish your piece and feel an immediate, deep thirst, which the water satisfies in long, steady swallows. The salt lingers, but not unpleasantly. It reminds you that you've eaten something substantial. The keeper closes the box carefully, sealing the remaining fish away from damp and air. Preservation is a constant battle, and every victory matters. As you stand, your body feels nourished in a practical way. No rush of comfort, no warmth spreading, just solidity, endurance. The lantern hums above you, its light sweeping across the water with the same patience you've learned to bring to your own movements. Salted fish, like this life, teaches you to slow down or be over. And as the night stretches on, you understand why this food endures. It doesn't distract you from the work. It supports it quietly, asking nothing in return. The biscuits come out only when the sea behaves. That's the unspoken rule. When the waves are low enough to sound like breathing instead of arguing. When the wind stops testing every joint in the tower. When the night feels willing to cooperate rather than challenge youth and the biscuits appear. You notice the keeper hesitate for just a moment before opening the tin. Not because it's difficult, but because this decision matters. These biscuits are different. Lighter, slightly sweet, still steady enough to survive the damp, but clearly made with a gentler intention. One widely accepted historical fact is that lighthouse keepers were sometimes issued sweet biscuits or ship's bread with molasses or sugar added, especially in the mid to late 19th century, as rations slowly improved. These were not everyday foods. They were meant to supplement morale, not replace staples. The keeper breaks one in half. The sound is softer than hardtack, more forgiving. He hands you a piece, and you're immediately aware of the smell, faintly sweet, faintly toasted, like a memory of a bakery carried across water. You take a bite and feel the difference. It still requires chewing, but it doesn't fight you. The sweetness is subtle, almost shy. It doesn't linger too long, which feels intentional, as if too much joy would be suspicious out here. A lesser-known detail is that some keepers saved their sweet biscuits specifically for calm nights, believing that treating yourself during storms was tempting fate. Whether superstition or coincidence, many journals mention good weather biscuits reserved for peaceful evenings. You eat slowly, savoring the rare softness. The lighthouse feels different tonight. Less tense. The beam moves across the sea without resistance, like it's skating instead of cutting. A quiet joke drifts in. This is desert. Lighthouse style. Another follows you. Imagine this biscuit being described enthusiastically to someone inland and being met with polite confusion. The keeper eats his portion with visible appreciation. Not exaggerated. Just a slight relaxation in his shoulders, a subtle sign that this moment has been anticipated. Historians still wonder how much superstition shaped daily life in isolated stations. Food rituals, especially, seem tied to weather patterns, personal beliefs, and attempts to impose meaning on an unpredictable environment. You finish your biscuit and notice how it changes the night. Not dramatically. Just enough. It adds a softness to the edges, a sense that things are under control. The tin is closed again, carefully. These biscuits will not be wasted on a rough night. They wait for evenings like this, when the sea decides to let you rest. As you lean against the wall and listen to the gentle rhythm of water against rock, you feel yourself matching it. Calm sea.com body. A small sweetness, earned and acknowledged, and you know that when the wind rises again and it will, these biscuits will stay hidden, quietly promising that calm always returns eventually. The jam jar lives on the highest shelf, not because it needs to, but because it feels safer there. You wouldn't knock it over by accident. You wouldn't open it casually. You have to mean it. The keeper reaches for it carefully, standing on the balls of his feet, fingers closing around glass that catches the lamplight like something precious. The jar is small, smaller than you expect. Its contents are dark, thick, and unmoving, as if time itself has slowed inside. One widely accepted historical fact is that preserved fruits jams, marmalades, and compotes were occasionally included in lighthouse provisions, especially later in the 19th century. Sugar acted as a preservative, making these rare treats last longer than fresh fruit ever could. The lid resists at first, Of course it does. The keeper taps it lightly against the table, twists again, and this time it yields with a soft pop that sounds almost celebratory. The smell escapes immediately, faintly tart, and shockingly alive compared to everything else you've eaten. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers rationed jam more strictly than any other food, sometimes limiting themselves to a spoonful every few days. Some journals even note keepers hiding jam from themselves, sealing it away after opening to avoid temptation. The keeper uses a small knife, not a spoon. Portions matter. He spreads a thin layer onto a biscuit, no thicker than a memory. He hands it to you with the seriousness of someone transferring responsibility. You bite. The sweetness arrives suddenly, bright and unmistakable. It wakes something up in you, not excitement, exactly, but recognition. This tastes like land, like gardens, like places where fruit grows without permission from the sea. You chew slowly, letting it last. The biscuit softens just enough. The jam clings. This is balance. This is planning. Rewarded. A gentle joke forms. This is practically a festival. Another follows you. Imagine a lighthouse keeper writing home about jam, with the intensity usually reserved for romance. The keeper eats his portion quietly, eyes unfocused, attention somewhere else entirely. Food like this doesn't need commentary. It creates its own silence. Historians still wonder how much access to preserved sweets affected morale in isolated stations. While nutritionally minor, these foods may have played an outsized role in emotional well-being, offering reminders of seasons, harvests, and ordinary life. The jar is sealed again immediately. No lingering, no second helpings. Anticipation is preserved along with the fruit. You wipe your fingers carefully. Sticky hands attract everything: dust, crumbs, trouble. The lighthouse prefers order. Outside, the sea remains calm, moonlight stretching across it in a pale, steady path. Inside, the sweetness lingers just long enough to soften the night. You feel a subtle shift. Not full, not hungry. Content in a quiet, controlled way. The kind that doesn't ask for more. The keeper replaces the jar on its shelf, higher than before, as if it's earned elevation. You understand. Some things deserve distance. As the lantern continues its steady rotation above, you realize that jam here is not about indulgence. It's about memory. A spoonful of something grown under the sun, carried across water, and saved for the moment when calm makes room for sweetness. And tonight, that moment has passed, sealed away again, waiting patiently for another peaceful evening. The coffee is never rushed, even when the night feels long, even when your eyelids threaten rebellion. Coffee is prepared with deliberate care, as if haste would offend it. The keeper sets the pot down and checks the grounds by smell rather than sight. He's done this enough times to trust his nose more than measurements. The water is hot, but not impatient. Steam curls upward in lazy spirals, fogging the air just enough to soften the edges of the room. One widely accepted historical fact is that coffee was a common stimulant for lighthouse keepers, especially during night watches. While tea was more widely consumed in general society, coffee's strength made it valuable for staying alert during long, dark hours. You sit as the coffee brews, listening to the faint bubbling, the gentle clink of metal as the pot settles. There's something ceremonial about it. This isn't just a drink. Its preparation. A lesser-known detail is that some keepers reused coffee grounds multiple times, stretching their supply as long as possible. Each brew grew weaker, but the ritual remained intact. It wasn't always about caffeine. Sometimes it was about continuity. The keeper pours 2 mugs. The liquid is dark, almost opaque. No sugar. No milk. Those luxuries are reserved for memories. He hands you one, and you feel the heat immediately. Grounding, familiar. You take a sip. It's bitter. Deeply so. Not unpleasant, but demanding. This coffee expects you to pay attention. A soft joke drifts through your thoughts. This isn't coffee that asks how you're feeling, it tells you. Another follows you. Imagine modern cafes trying to sell this as authentic maritime endurance. Brew and failing politely. The keeper drinks slowly, eyes occasionally lifting toward the stairs, listening for changes in the lantern's rhythm. Coffee here is multitasking fuel. It warms your hands, sharpens your senses, and gives your mouth something to focus on during quiet hours. Historians still wonder how much caffeine dependence shaped the daily lives of keepers. Some records suggest heavy consumption during winter months, tapering off when daylight lengthened. Others imply coffee became as much a comfort as a necessity. You finish half your mug and feel the effect, not a jolt, but a steady clearing. The fog in your head lifts slightly. The night feels manageable again. The keeper sets his mug down, covers it loosely to keep out dust, and stands. Time for another check. As you rise, the warmth of the coffee stays with you, settling behind your ribs like a quiet promise. You're not wide awake. You don't need to be. Just present enough to notice when something changes. The lantern continues its slow rotation above. Outside, the sea reflects light in fragments. Inside, coffee does its quiet work, supporting the long watch without demanding applause. And as the night stretches on, you understand that coffee here isn't about fighting sleep. It's about pacing it, allowing rest to wait until it's earned. Midnight doesn't announce itself with drama. It arrives quietly, almost apologetically, slipping into the lighthouse the way fog does soft, uninvited, and suddenly everywhere. The keeper notices not by a clock, but by feel. By the way the air shifts, by the weight of the silence between waves. You're back near the lantern now, where the great lens turns with unhurried confidence. Each rotation is smooth, precise, dependable. It doesn't care what time it is. It only cares that it keeps moving. One widely accepted historical fact is that lighthouse keepers were required to inspect the lantern multiple times throughout the night, often every few hours, to ensure the flame burned evenly and the lens remained clean. Midnight checks were among the most important, when fatigue could quietly cause mistakes. Between rotations, there's waiting. Not idle waiting, alert. Waiting, the kind that keeps your body still, but your senses gently awake. This is where midnight snacks belong. The keeper reaches into a pocket you hadn't noticed before, and pulls out something small, wrapped in paper that's been folded and unfolded many times. He doesn't open it immediately. First, he listens. The lens hums. The flame is steady. Satisfied, he unwraps the snack. It's simply a small piece of bread, slightly hardened at the edges, spread thinly with something savory, maybe leftover cheese. Maybe a smear of fat saved carefully from another meal. It's not about variety anymore. It's about quiet sustenance. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers favored very small snacks during night checks, preferring not to eat heavily when their bodies were already resisting wakefulness. Light food kept energy steady without inviting drowsiness. You take a bite and chew slowly, careful not to let crumbs fall near the mechanism. The taste is familiar, now comfortingly so. You don't need surprise at midnight. You need reassurance. A light joke forms in your mind. This is the original midnight snack, minus the refrigerator light and plus several tons of glass. Another follows you suspect. This lens has seen more awkward late-night eating than any mirror ever has. The keeper eats with his back to the lantern, trusting its rhythm. He's earned that trust. Years of listening have taught him when something is wrong. Historians still wonder how much trust keepers placed in sound rather than sight during night watches. Many accounts describe recognizing mechanical problems by subtle changes in hums, clicks, or vibrations, skills sharpened during these quiet hours. You finish your bite and feel steady. Not energized, not sleepy. Balanced, like a scale that's found its center. The keeper wipes his hands carefully and rewraps the remaining food. Nothing is left open. Midnight is not forgiving of carelessness. Outside, the sea is a dark sheet, reflecting the beam and broken lines. Inside, the lighthouse feels almost meditative. The combination of slow movement, low light, and gentle eating creates a space where thoughts soften and drift. As the lantern completes another rotation, you realize how important these midnight moments are. They're not dramatic, they're not rewarding in obvious ways, but they hold the night together, bite by bite, turn by turn. And as you step back from the lantern, the quiet satisfaction of a small snack lingers, just enough to carry you through the next stretch of darkness. It almost never happens, which is why it feels unreal when it does. A shape appears where there usually isn't one. A sound breaks the usual pattern of wind and water. The keeper pauses mid-step, head tilted, listening in a way that tells you this is different. Bifitor. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a boat easing closer than expected. Oars dipping carefully. A voice carried softly across the water. Rare enough that your first instinct is to doubt it. Like spotting a deer in a place you've only ever seen rocks. One widely accepted historical fact is that many lighthouse keepers spent weeks or months without seeing another person, especially at remote stations. Visits were infrequent, and usually tied to supply runs, inspections, or emergency shelter. The keeper moves quickly now, but not urgently. There's a difference. He prepares the landing area, checks the light once more, and opens the door. Cold air rushes in, sharper than before, carrying the smell of wet rope and unfamiliar wool. The visitor steps inside, stamping water from boots, offering a nod that says everything words don't need to. This is how meetings happen out here. No introductions, no small talk, just shared understanding. And then, almost without discussion, food appears. A lesser-known detail is that when visitors arrived, keepers often shared their food without hesitation, even though supplies were precious. Hospitality at sea followed different rules. You might need the same kindness tomorrow. The keeper brings out what he can spare. Bread, a bit of cheese, perhaps a biscuit if the night feels generous. Portions are modest, but the act itself carries weight. You sit together near the stove, bodies angled inward. The room suddenly fuller, not louder, just warmer. Eating becomes communal in a way it hasn't been all night. A soft joke crosses your mind. This is a dinner party by lighthouse standards. Another follower realized this might be the most people the room has held in weeks. The visitor eats slowly, appreciatively. No one russes. No one apologizes for simplicity. The food tastes different now. Not because it's changed, but because it's shared. Historians still wonder how these brief social interactions affected keeper morale. Some letters describe visits as highlights remembered for years. Others mention the strange quiet after, when routine settles back in and the lighthouse feels larger again. Conversation, if it happens at all, is minimal. Weather, sea conditions. Nothing that demands emotional energy. The light continues its work above you, indifferent to company. Eventually, the visitor stands. The boat waits. Goodbyes are brief. Promises are implied, not spoken. The door closes. The lighthouse exhales. You and the keeper sit for a moment longer, finishing what's left. The room feels quieter now, but not empty. Something has shifted. A reminder that the world beyond the beam still exists. As you clean up, you notice how carefully the remaining food is wrapped. Sharing didn't disrupt the balance. It reaffirmed it. And as the keeper returns to his rounds, you follow, carrying the gentle warmth of shared food into the long, steady night. The storm announces itself early, long before it arrives. The air thickens. The wind stops playing and starts planning. Even the sea seems to gather itself, waves pulling back as if to make room for what is coming next. The keeper feels it before he sees it. A pause mid-step, a glance toward the horizon that lingers a second too long. This is not a night for leisure. This is a night for readiness. One widely accepted historical fact is that storms were the most dangerous and demanding times for lighthouse keepers. High winds could damage lantern mechanisms, waves could flood lower levels, and the pressure to keep the light visible intensified as ships struggled against the weather. The first gust hits the tower like a firm knock. The lighthouse answers with a deep, structural groan. Everything holds, but nothing ignores it. There's no ceremony tonight. Snacks become practical again. The keeper reaches for a small bundle, kept close at hand, not hidden away or elevated. Emergency food, the kind you can eat quickly, standing up with one hand braced against the wall. A piece of hard bread, a chunk of cheese, already cut. No jam, no biscuits. Those belong to commerces. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers prepared storm rations in advance, keeping food ready in accessible places so they wouldn't have to leave critical posts during severe weather. Eating during storms was about efficiency, not enjoyment. You take a bite and chew faster than usual, not rushed, but purposeful. The storm demands attention. The lighthouse shudders slightly as a wave strikes rock below, sending vibration up through stone and bone. A dry joke flickers through your thoughts. This is what dining with a view looks like when the view is trying to eat you. Another fellow suspect no restaurant could charge enough for this experience. The keeper moves constantly now. Check, adjust, listen. The lens turns on, unwavering, its rhythm almost defiant. You stay out of the way, handing tools, holding doors, learning quickly how to be useful without being noticed. Between tasks, another bite. Small, dense. Enough to keep your hands steady and your thoughts clear. Historians still wonder how keepers managed fear during major storms. Records suggest that routine of an eating played a crucial role. Familiar actions anchored the mind when the environment grew unpredictable. The storm peaks, wind howling around the tower, rain rattling against glass like thrown gravel. Inside, the lighthouse halls. So do you. Eventually, gradually, the violence softens. The wind loosens its grip. The waves retreat to something closer to breathing again. You finish the last of the emergency food and realize you're standing where you were an hour ago, just more tired. The keeper leans briefly against the wall, allowing himself one deep breath. The light never faltered. As the storm moves on, leaving dampness and exhaustion behind, you feel a quiet pride, not the loud kind, just a steady satisfaction. You've eaten when necessary, worked when required, endured, and as calm returns, the lighthouse settles once more into its familiar hum, ready for dawn and whatever small snack might come with it. Dawn doesn't rush you. It arrives carefully, testing the edges of the sky the way you test cold water with your toes. The darkness thins. The sea changes color, from ink to slate to something softer, more forgiving. The lighthouse notices before you do. Its work is almost finished. You stand near the window and watch the horizon loosen. The beam still turns, but it feels less necessary now, like someone finishing a sentence they've already been understood in. The keeper moves more slowly. There's no urgency left to borrow from the night. One widely accepted historical fact is that lighthouse lights were extinguished at dawn. Once natural light made them unnecessary. For keepers, this marked the end of the most demanding part of the shift, and the beginning of quieter maintenance and rest. The keeper checks the lantern one final time. He doesn't rush this either. Habits don't disappear just because the sun shows up. Satisfied, he dims the flame, and the great lens slows, then rests. The sudden stillness feels louder than the storm ever did. This is when the last crumbs appear. Nothing elaborate. Nothing ceremonial, just the remains of the night. Half a biscuit, a corner of bread, a sliver of cheese wrapped so tightly it almost forgot what it was. The keeper sets them on the table, dividing them without thought. Morning food is not about fuel. It's about closure. A lesser-known detail is that many keepers prefer to eat lightly at dawn, letting their bodies wind down rather than wake up. Heavy meals belong to daylight hours. Dawn was for easing out, not charging in. You eat slowly, watching the sun lift itself free of the water. Each bite feels softer now, gentler. The food hasn't changed, but you have. The hunger is different, quieter, almost satisfied before it starts. A soft joke drifts through your thoughts. This is breakfast. Lighthouse edition served with existential relief. Another follows you realize crumbs have never felt so earned. Historians still wonder how keepers transitioned between night vigilance and daytime routine without modern sleep science. Many accounts suggest that food rituals, small, predictable, calming, helped signal the body that it was safe to rest. The keeper finishes his last bite and wipes the table carefully. The day cruise sometimes. Just himself again will arrive soon enough. But for now, there's a pause, a space between responsibilities. You feel your body respond to the light. Shoulders relax. Breathing slows. The sea looks almost harmless now, pretending it didn't try anything a few hours ago. As you step outside briefly, The air is cold but clean. Gulls cry somewhere in the distance, already awake and unimpressed by your long night. The lighthouse stands quiet behind you, no longer glowing, but no less important. When you return inside, the keeper nods. Not goodbye, just acknowledgement. You've shared the night. That's enough. You sit, feeling the warmth fade gently from your hands. The fullness settle into something like peace. The crumbs are gone. The light is out. The routine is complete, and as the day stretches ahead, you know this moment, this quiet ending is as much a part of lighthouse life as the storms, the stairs, and the snacks that carried you through the dark. The night has finished its work now, and so have you. There's nothing left to check, nothing left to listen for, no quiet alarms waiting to be noticed. The lighthouse rests, and in its stillness, it gives you permission to do the same. You settle into the calm that follows effort, that gentle heaviness behind the eyes that feels earned rather than forced. Your breathing slows on its own. No instructions required. In and out, like the sea you've been listening to all night. Steady and unconcerned with time. Imagine the stone walls holding a soft warmth now, releasing it gradually, the way they always do after dawn. The air smells cleaner, less oil, more morning. Somewhere outside, light moves across water and wide, unhurried strokes, smoothing everything it touches. You don't need to stay alert anymore. The beam has done its job. The snacks have done theirs. Hunger is quiet. Thoughts drift instead of circle. Even the small jokes that kept you company earlier fade, smiling politely as they leave. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw loosen. Let the night gently unhook itself from you. If your mind wanders, that's fine. Let it can walk the spiral stairs one last time. Slowly. Without purpose, it can sit by the stove that's no longer warm. It can watch the horizon brighten until shapes lose their edges and become calm again. Nothing is required of you now. Not vigilance. Not productivity. Not even attention. Just rest. Picture yourself lying somewhere safe and still, wrapped in the quiet that follows a long, honest night. The lighthouse remains behind. You steady, silent, content, while you drift away, lighter with every breath. Sleep can arrive whenever it's ready. You've done sweet dreams.